Look out your window. The concrete, the steel, the data streams, it all feels so permanent, doesn't it? We reassure ourselves that we are the pinnacle, the first species to truly master this planet. But geologists tell us that 100,000 years is nothing but a blink in the eye of the cosmos. If a civilization as advanced as ours existed before us, nature would have ground their skyscrapers to dust and rusted their machines into nothingness long ago. We are walking on a graveyard of eras we refuse to acknowledge. We have to ask, what if the story of civilization is not a line, but a circle, one that has turned so many times that we've forgotten where it began? What if beneath every layer of soil, beneath every fossilized leaf and grain of quartz, there sleeps a memory of another humanity, one erased so thoroughly that even time itself has trouble recalling its name? The earth keeps no diary, only silence. Yet within that silence there are fractures, anomalies that do not belong. And if you listen closely, between the pulse of the present and the hum of the deep, you might hear the echo of something that once was. So before you let your body sink deeper into comfort, take a slow breath. And before your eyes grow too heavy, take a moment to like this video and subscribe. Only if you truly feel drawn to what we're uncovering here. Tell me, from where and what hour do you listen tonight? Somewhere someone else may be listening at the same time, tracing the same question. What if we are not the first? Archaeology calls it an anomaly, when something refuses to fit. A hammer encased in stone, said to be millions of years old. Human footprints crossing layers of Permian shale long before our species existed. Tiny metallic spheres perfectly balanced, grooved, and found deep in Precambrian rock. Mainstream science often labels them as misinterpretations, hoaxes, or coincidences. But the pattern of the impossible repeats, as if the Earth itself occasionally exhales fragments of a memory that doesn't match our current chapter. What if these fragments are not errors, but remnants? Faint signals from a forgotten epoch when consciousness took a different shape. Geologists speak of deep time, epochs so stretched beyond imagination that our languages fail to measure them. Yet every fossilized shell and petrified forest reminds us that the Earth has been many worlds before ours. Entire biospheres rose and fell, continents shifted, oceans vanished, and life began again. If evolution can restart after cataclysm, why not civilization? What if intelligence, not bound to our specific form, has emerged more than once, each time rising, thriving, and disappearing, leaving only traces so faint we mistake them for coincidence? In the 19th century, miners in California's Table Mountain found tools, mortar, and pestle shapes embedded in layers of volcanic rock, millions of years old. Geologist J.D. Whitney, then of Harvard, documented these findings with great care. Yet his reports were buried, dismissed as geological confusion. In the 1970s, when researchers revisited the records, they discovered that the rock layers had been correctly dated. What then, they asked, could possibly explain a human-like tool sealed in strata so ancient that even primitive apes had not yet appeared? The question was too heavy. Silence followed. This silence echoes across centuries. We see it in discoveries like the London hammer, the Nampa figurine of Idaho, or the metallic objects of Klerksdorp. Each time, the response is the same. It cannot be. Therefore, it is not. But science, like history, is written by consensus. And consensus is not always truth. It is comfort. Beneath comfort lies the disquieting possibility that our story is incomplete, perhaps deliberately simplified, perhaps merely forgotten. Imagine peeling back the surface of the world like the thin skin of an onion. Below the soil of our own cities lies the dust of older ones, eras that have been erased by flood, fire, or ice. Dig deeper still, and one might reach epochs where the very atmosphere was different, when continents wore names long dissolved by erosion. Somewhere in those layers could rest the faint geometry of a machine, the curve of an artifact that whispers, "We were here once too." Some say this idea is fantasy, that to imagine an ancient advanced civilization millions of years ago is to dream beyond evidence. Yet what counts as evidence? Our records of history barely reach 10,000 years, a blink compared to the 4.5 billion years that Earth has endured. 99.9% of everything that has ever lived is gone. Why should civilization be any different? In 1973, a Russian research team discovered perfectly machined metallic coils, smaller than a millimeter, buried deep in the Ural Mountains. The strata dated to hundreds of thousands of years before modern humans. The objects were analyzed and found to be composed of tungsten and molybdenum, metals that require extremely high temperatures to refine. Skeptics claimed contamination, yet none could fully explain the precision or composition. Perhaps these fragments belonged not to alien visitors, but to something far more unsettling: ourselves. Long before we were ourselves, the Earth recycles memory through erosion and magma. Mountains rise and crumble, seas swallow coasts, glaciers grind continents to dust. Given enough time, even steel and glass become indistinguishable from stone. If an entire civilization had once covered the planet millions of years ago, how much would remain? Perhaps only anomalies dismissed by textbooks as curiosities. Perhaps only whispers embedded in myth. Perhaps nothing but intuition, a human sense that something vast is missing.
When early geologists studied the stratified cliffs of Dorset and the coal seams of India, they noticed a pattern. Each age buried the last beneath silt, lava, and time. Civilization itself might be subject to this same law of sedimentation, its rise and fall recorded not in paper or code, but in the Earth's geology. And if that is true, then we are merely one more layer, destined one day to be dust pressed into stone, leaving behind questions no one will know how to answer. History as we know it is a candle burning in a hall of mirrors, its reflections stretching backward into shadows we can no longer see. Every time we believe we've reached the beginning, the light catches on another surface, revealing shapes behind the veil, half erased, half remembered. Perhaps there were others before us. Perhaps their world ended and ours began on their ashes. Or perhaps we are the continuation of something that never truly ended, merely forgotten by design. As you lie there now, hearing the slow rhythm of your own breath, imagine the planet beneath you as a layered consciousness. Imagine the continents as memories, the oceans as the mind's deep forgetting. Somewhere within that ancient memory, there might still be an image of who walked here before us, what language they spoke, what sky they worshipped, what dreams they left behind. The question lingers, suspended in the darkness between heartbeats. If we are not the first, then whose ruins do we sleep upon tonight? If history is built upon layers, then perhaps truth lies not in what we see above the ground, but in what sleeps beneath it, beneath our cities, our roads, and the monuments we've raised to our own greatness. There may be traces of another world buried so deep that it now speaks only through the language of stone. What would happen if we could peel back those layers one by one? Would we find the familiar bones of ancient rivers and forgotten forests? Or something that defies the very rhythm of human memory? When geologists slice into the earth, they reveal a chronology far older than any story written by civilization. The strata form like pages of an endless book, each chapter in which life rises, falls, and begins again. Most of us imagine these chapters as separate, disconnected worlds: the age of reptiles, the age of ice, the age of man. But what if the boundaries are illusions? What if the sediment hides not extinction, but interruption?
moments when civilization itself was rewritten, erased, and started anew. Some of the world's oldest landscapes seem to hint at this. In South Africa's Barberton Greenstone Belt, rock formations more than 3 billion years old contain curious spherical inclusions, perfectly rounded metallic forms that scientists have called Klerksdorp spheres. They are balanced to within 1/1000th of an inch and composed of materials resistant to natural weathering. Officially, they are geological oddities created by natural processes deep underground. Yet even geologists whisper that the precision is unsettling. It is as though someone or something had shaped them before the continents themselves took form. Far to the north, in the frozen lands of Siberia, there are stories of metallic ruins half buried in the tundra. Local Evenki legends tell of domed structures that hummed beneath the ground, warm even in midwinter. Soviet expeditions in the 1950s reported strange metallic fragments near the Tunguska impact site melted into the permafrost. Some dismissed them as remnants of meteorites, others as industrial debris. But the oral tradition persisted, long before factories, long before exploration, claiming that these domes were the remnants of a time before the sky fell, a time when the Earth had other inhabitants. Mainstream archaeology recoils from these tales, and perhaps rightly so. The discipline is built on evidence, not myth. But myths, too, are sedimentary. Each story is a layer compressed by retelling, containing grains of truth that time cannot completely crush. When the same themes reappear across continents, advanced beings descending from the stars, lost ages of knowledge, floods that erase civilizations, it is tempting to dismiss them as coincidence. Yet coincidence repeated across millennia becomes pattern. In the 20th century, a few daring scholars began to question the straight line of human progress. One of them, Charles Hapgood, proposed that the Earth's crust may have shifted violently in the distant past, displacing entire civilizations. He gathered maps, copies of older copies, showing coastlines and mountain ranges uncannily accurate for their supposed age. The most famous, the Piri Reis map of 1513, appeared to depict Antarctica not under ice, but as a habitable land. Mainstream historians called it impossible. Yet the map itself exists. Even Albert Einstein, fascinated by Hapgood's theory, wrote to him in support, suggesting that our planet's outer shell may indeed have slipped over the rest. If such a shift occurred, how many cities would vanish beneath the ocean? How many records would dissolve under salt and pressure? In the late 1990s, sonar surveys off the coast of India revealed geometric structures lying 120 feet beneath the waters of the Gulf of Cambay. The site was dated, controversially, to around 10,000 years ago, thousands of years older than any known city.
When divers descended, they found stone blocks and patterned arrangements that seemed unmistakably artificial. Yet the ocean's sediment soon reclaimed the site. Mainstream archaeologists expressed skepticism, but the question remained: if one city could lie beneath the sea, how many others might be hidden beneath the continents themselves? Earthquakes, floods, and volcanoes are not mere natural events. They are editors of history, redacting entire chapters in seconds. The explosion of Thera erased the Minoan world in fire and ash. The collapse of the Laurentide ice sheet rewrote the climate of the Northern Hemisphere. And the great flood myths of every culture, Mesopotamian, Hindi, Mayan, speak of a deluge that wiped the slate clean. Could these be fragments of an older memory? A global catastrophe that destroyed not the first civilization, but perhaps the latest in a cycle? Modern science acknowledges that the human species has been anatomically the same for nearly 300,000 years. Yet civilization as we know it is barely 10,000 years old. What occupied the other 290,000? Were our ancestors truly wandering aimlessly through forests and plains? Or did they build, learn, and lose, over and over again. The archaeological record grows sparse beyond a certain depth, as though the Earth itself chose to forget. In recent decades, researchers have unearthed hints of sophistication far older than previously imagined. At Göbekli in Turkey, megalithic pillars carved with animal reliefs stand buried beneath layers of soil dating back 12,000 years. The site predates agriculture, writing, and the wheel. Yet its builders had knowledge of geometry, astronomy, and stonecraft, rivaling later empires. Even more mysterious is that the site was deliberately buried, as if its creators wished to seal it away. What wisdom were they hiding, and from whom? To understand the layers beneath the layers, one must accept that time is not linear. The strata beneath our feet are less a ladder than a spiral, each turn bringing a new rise and fall. Civilizations bloom, vanish, and return under new names, carrying fragments of forgotten knowledge in their myths and symbols. When ancient peoples carved spirals into rock faces, perhaps they were not simply decorating, they were remembering. And so the question deepens. If our story is cyclical, then what cycle are we in now? Are we the beginning or the end of another turn? When satellites orbit above and oceans warm below, do we unknowingly recreate the same arc that others once followed toward brilliance, toward collapse, toward silence? The Earth has patience. It can wait 1,000,000 years to forget, and another 1,000,000 to remember. Somewhere beneath the basalt plains of Africa or the frozen shelves of Antarctica, there may still lie a city pressed into stone, a record of a civilization whose name we will never know. Perhaps the reason we find so few traces is simple. We are walking on their graves. And perhaps when our own cities crumble and the oceans rise again, another intelligence will one day stand above our ruins, wondering if their kind were truly the first. The layers of history are not dead. They breathe slowly under the weight of time. Every fossil, every stone tool, every buried wall is a lung inhaling and exhaling through eternity. And if we lean close enough, we might hear it whisper, "I have been here before." And so, as night deepens and your thoughts begin to drift, imagine yourself descending through those layers, not just through rock and soil, but through memory itself, down where the boundaries blur, where myth becomes geology and fact becomes dream. There, in the darkness of deep time, something waits, not to be found, but to be remembered. What if the Earth is not holding our past hostage at all? What if it is simply waiting for us to remember that we are always part of its own forgotten story? There are stones in this world that seem to mock our sense of order. Stones carved with impossible precision, fused with metals no ancient hand was meant to shape, or resting in layers of earth that predate all known civilizations. Each time one is found, it slips briefly through the light of discovery before being swallowed again by disbelief. These are the stones that shouldn't exist. And yet they do. They speak without language, as though trying to remind the present that it is not as original as it believes. The story always begins the same way. A miner, a farmer, or a geologist working the earth stumbles upon something that shouldn't be there. In 1851, workers blasting rock near Dorchester, Massachusetts, uncovered a bell-shaped metal vessel in two halves, one side adorned with silver inlay and floral designs. The rock layer it was found in was dated to roughly 600 million years old. Newspapers at the time reported the discovery, marveling at its craftsmanship. But as decades passed, the artifact disappeared into obscurity, dismissed as either misreported or misdated. Still, the thought lingered. How could human hands have shaped metal before there were even dinosaurs? A century later, in 1961, 3 men searching for geodes near Atlantic, California, cracked open a concretion and found something inside. A corroded iron cylinder encased in hardened clay. X-rays revealed a metallic core resembling a spark plug. Yet the surrounding rock was dated to nearly 500,000 years. Known as the Koso artifact, it ignited fierce debate. Was it a modern object encased by a rare natural process, or a fragment from a civilization so ancient that our current memory cannot contain it? The scientific community moved quickly to label it coincidence, but coincidence begins to sound suspicious when it repeats across continents and centuries. Then, there are the metallic spheres of South Africa, smooth, grooved, and perfectly balanced. Miners discovered them embedded in pyrophyllite rock, estimated to be nearly 3 billion years old. Museum curators claimed they were natural concretions, yet their symmetry was too perfect, their grooves too deliberate. One specimen reportedly spun on its axis when placed in a glass case, as though remembering motion. How do you explain geometry that predates evolution itself? Skeptics are right to question extraordinary claims. Hoaxes abound. But within the legitimate archives of geology and archaeology, there exists a consistent hum of anomaly. Cases where artifacts seem genuinely out of place, too advanced, too deliberate. The Dorchester vessel, the Koso artifact, the Nampa figurine carved from clay 300 feet beneath the Idaho desert, all suggest that history may not be a straight ascent from ignorance to enlightenment, but a fractured cycle punctuated by loss. Even the Antikythera Mechanism, discovered in a Roman-era shipwreck, was once thought to be impossible. A machine of interlocking gears so complex that nothing comparable appeared again for more than 1,000 years. When researchers finally reconstructed it, they found it could predict planetary positions and eclipses. Mainstream scholars called it a unique marvel, an accident of genius. But what if it was a descendant of something older, a remnant of knowledge inherited rather than invented? The stones themselves do not argue, they simply persist. Their surfaces hold no emotion, only precision. When one gazes upon the megaliths of Baalbek, stones weighing more than 1,000 tons, carved and moved as if weight were irrelevant, one feels the same contradiction. How could Bronze Age engineers lift something that even our cranes struggle to move? And why across the world, from the Andes to the Aegean, do the oldest structures often show the greatest sophistication, as if civilization began at its peak and slowly forgot? Geologists sometimes find tool marks in layers of stone thought to be millions of years old, chisel-like grooves or polished surfaces that defy natural explanation. The argument is always that erosion, pressure, or mineral crystallization produce these forms by chance. But the Earth is vast, and chance, however rare, repeats. At what point does chance begin to look like pattern, and pattern begin to resemble intention? There is something haunting in the persistence of these objects. Each one dismissed and buried mirrors the fate of the civilization it implies. Found, denied, forgotten. Perhaps that is the natural order. Truth appearing only when we are too certain to accept it. Perhaps the stones are not messages to us at all, but echoes left by others who also searched the ground for meaning, who also found fragments that didn't fit, who also buried them again to protect the illusion of certainty. Some researchers suggest that natural processes can mimic the appearance of design. Mineralization, crystallization, even bacterial growth can produce shapes that seem intentional. And yet, these same researchers admit that the Earth's capacity for order is mysterious. Nature itself might be the ultimate engineer, its structures more precise than any civilization could replicate. But if so, then the line between natural and artificial begins to dissolve. Perhaps the ancients understood this. Perhaps the very act of carving stone was a dialogue between human and geological intelligence, a conversation lost to us. Now, when we stand before ancient ruins, we tend to think of them as beginnings, yet maybe they are endings, the last visible expressions of a civilization's knowledge before it sank back into the earth. Over tens of thousands of years, even the grandest structures decay. Metals oxidize, ceramics crumble, and within a few million years, nothing remains but mineral ghosts. To find anything at all that carries precision across such epochs is astonishing. That such things exist and that we have found them at all suggests that memory is stubborn. There are scientists who believe intelligence could have arisen on Earth long before us, perhaps from another branch of life entirely, now extinct. If an advanced species had once flourished here, the geological record would likely erase nearly every trace. Our own civilization, if ended today, would be invisible in less than 10 million years. Concrete would dissolve, glass would return to sand, metal would rust into the soil. Only the most durable remnants, stone, ceramics, or subtle chemical imprints, might survive. And perhaps in another distant future, someone else would find them and wonder, as we do now, how such things could exist. So maybe these out-of-place stones are not intrusions into our story, but invitations to remember that history is fragile. Each discovery we make as a flicker in a storm of forgetting. The deeper we dig, the more the earth blurs the line between myth.
Perhaps that is its way of reminding us that truth cannot be preserved, only rediscovered again and again, like a dream that refuses to end. As you listen now and the quiet of night settles around you, imagine holding one of those impossible stones in your hand. Feel its cold surface, its perfect symmetry, its weight against your palm. Try to imagine the hands that once shaped it, hands that may have belonged to a being like you or not like you at all. The artifact does not speak, but you can sense the whisper beneath its stillness. You were not the first. And as the whisper fades into the rhythm of your breathing, another question rises, soft, persistent, unanswerable. If these stones remember what we have forgotten, then who or what do they still wait for to return? Beneath the calm surface of the oceans lies a silence older than memory. It is the kind of silence that does not merely exist, it listens. Every wave that breaks upon the shore carries with it a secret, a particle of something ancient. The sea remembers everything that the land forgets. Empires crumble and cities turn to dust, but the ocean swallows their remains and keeps them suspended in an eternal dream, preserved beneath layers of salt and darkness. If a civilization once existed before ours, one erased not by war or time, but by water, then its bones still rest there, waiting. Oceanographers estimate that more than 90% of the planet's archaeological record lies underwater. Each century, the sea level rises and falls, drowning coastlines and exposing others. 12,000 years ago, when the last ice age ended, the ocean rose nearly 400 feet. Whole continents of fertile land vanished beneath it. Doggerland in the North Sea, the Cinderland Shelf in Southeast Asia, and the lost plains that once connected India to Arabia. These were not barren places. Rivers once wound through them, forests thrived, and perhaps cities stood where now only waves remain. If civilization was born there, its story has been erased not by ignorance, but by tide. Divers exploring the coast of Japan near Yonauni stumbled upon one such memory in 1986, a vast complex of stepped terraces and angular structures buried beneath the Pacific.
The stone surfaces are so sharply carved, so deliberate, that it is difficult to believe they're natural. Rectangular platforms rise like ziggurats. Stairways descend into shadow. Some scientists insist the formations are merely eroded sandstone sculpted by current and time. Yet the lines are too precise, the angles too consistent. A few divers report patterns resembling glyphs, as though language once danced across those submerged walls. If it is a natural formation, it is one that dreams in geometry. If it is artificial, it is a civilization's gravestone. Further west, near the coast of India, sonar surveys in the Gulf of Cambay revealed an even greater mystery. Structures spread across miles of ocean floor arranged in perfect grid-like patterns. Samples of material dredged from the site were dated to nearly 9,500 years ago, predating the cities of Mesopotamia by millennia. The water there is opaque and filled with silt, making exploration dangerous. Yet each expedition returns with fragments of pottery, bone, and worked stone. Officially, the data remains inconclusive. But one cannot help wondering how many such cities are buried beneath the waves, unknown simply because no one has looked. Even in the Mediterranean, whispers of lost worlds persist. Near Alexandria, divers uncovered remnants of an ancient harbor long mythic. Columns, statues, and roads leading into the sea. And further west, the story of Atlantis, recorded by Plato, hovers between philosophy and memory. He described it as an island of immense wealth and knowledge that fell beneath the waves in a single day and night of misfortune. Scholars call it allegory, but to those who listen carefully, it sounds less like invention and more like remembrance, the echo of a cataclysm retold by survivors. The ocean hides its secrets well. Pressure crushes, salt corrodes, and darkness erases color until all that remains is shape. But there are places where the sea seems almost to protect what it has taken. Off the coast of Cuba, sonar scans once revealed enormous geometric structures nearly 2,000 feet below the surface. Some speculated they were natural ridges, others that they were the ruins of a city older than any known. Expeditions were brief, the water too deep for divers. Funding ended, and the mystery returned to silence. Yet the images remain, patterns too deliberate to dismiss, too elusive to prove. It is strange to think that we know more about the surface of Mars than about our own ocean floor. The abyssal plains stretch across 70% of the planet, a dark library that no one has yet read. Perhaps our oldest history lies not in caves or deserts, but in those unseen vaults of sediment. The sea has a way of transforming tragedy into preservation. In its cold depths, decay slows and time itself thickens. Wooden ships endure for centuries, bronze statues rest unbroken, and human bones sealed in silt whisper their stories to no one. If an ancient civilization once thrived before the great melt of the Ice Age, its memory would now rest beneath those same layers, stone temples, harbors, and roads, all sealed in the sea's indifference.
And perhaps that is why myth so often speaks of floods. From the Epic of Gilgamesh to the Genesis story, from the Sumerian tablets to the Maya Popol Vuh, the flood is always the dividing line, the moment when the gods reset the world. Archaeologists trace these myths to local deluges, but they share uncanny similarities. A warning, a destruction, a chosen remnant, and the rebirth of knowledge. What if these stories are not allegory but testimony, echoes of a world swallowed whole? Some oceanographers believe that the ancient shorelines, now hundreds of feet underwater, may hold the missing chapters of human evolution. They call it the submerged prehistory. Before agriculture, before written language, coastal plains offered abundant food and stable climates. It is natural that early humans or their precursors would have lived there. When the glaciers melted, their homes vanished beneath rising seas. The archaeological silence that follows might not be absence, but concealment. What we call prehistory may simply be the part of our story that the ocean has chosen to keep. Imagine the weight of those waters pressing upon the ruins below. The columns, the amphorae, the inscriptions etched into stone that no eye has seen in 12,000 years. The ocean is not cruel in its silence. It is patient. It knows that everything eventually returns to it. Civilizations may rise and fall, but gravity and erosion always lead back to the sea. Even now, cities along our coasts are surrendering to it inch by inch. One day they too will join that sunken library, another layer in the slow sedimentation of memory. If the ocean holds our forgotten past, then every wave that touches the shore is a messenger from those older worlds. The salt on your skin may once have washed through a drowned street or touched the carved lintel of a temple long gone. The tides themselves are memory in motion, a rhythm the planet has never stopped repeating. Each crash of surf is a syllable in a language older than speech, saying again and again, all that is lost is not gone. As night deepens and you listen to the faint pulse of your own blood, so much like the pulse of the tide, imagine the vast darkness below. Imagine the light fading as you descend through schools of silent fish, through the last glow of the surface, down into a realm where human time dissolves. Somewhere there, beneath centuries of sediment, lies a doorway carved by hands no one remembers. Beyond it, perhaps, a chamber filled with air so old it could tell the story of the world before us. And maybe, just maybe, that story is still unfolding. Perhaps the sea, in its quiet watchfulness, is waiting for us to ask the one question that matters. What if the next great discovery is not across the stars, but below the waves that already cradle our forgotten home? There is something unsettling about stone. It does not breathe. It does not grow. And yet it endures longer than any living thing. Stone remembers what flesh forgets. It bears the marks of those who once believed that permanence could be carved, that knowledge could be hidden in weight and form. Across continents, across epochs, the same impulse reappears, to lift the impossible, to fit mountains together with precision so exact that even light cannot slip through the seams. The question lingers, who were these architects of stone? And what language did they speak through granite? At Baalbek in Lebanon, a massive terrace lies beneath Roman ruins. Its foundation blocks, the trilithon, are the largest ever moved by human hands. Each one weighs more than 1,000 tons. Modern cranes could not lift them. The Romans built upon them, not from them, as if they had inherited the site from something older. Archaeologists argue that ancient engineers might have rolled or levered the stones, but none can explain how they were quarried, transported, and precisely aligned on uneven terrain. The foundation seems less a platform than a message, an act of defiance against time. Thousands of miles away in the high Andes of Peru, the walls of Sacsayhuaman mirror that same mastery. The stones, some weighing over 300 tons, interlock like a puzzle, their edges curved and fitted so perfectly that they resist even seismic waves. The Inca were brilliant builders, but they themselves said the fortress was older than their empire. They called it the work of the gods, built by giants who softened stone as if it were clay. The myth is poetic.
Yet when one runs a hand over those seamless joints, the notion of softened stone begins to feel less like fantasy and more like memory. In Turkey, beneath layers of soil and centuries, lies Göbekli Tepe, a site so ancient that it rewrote archaeology. 12,000-year-old megalithic pillars carved with animal reliefs arranged in concentric circles with astronomical precision. It predates agriculture, pottery, and the wheel. According to conventional timelines, hunter-gatherers built it before humans even knew how to settle. Yet there it stands, a temple complex of monumental art and geometry, deliberately buried by their makers, as though sealing away a secret they knew must not survive the flood of time. The pyramids of Egypt rise from the desert like frozen hymns. We measure their angles, chart their stars, and speak of pharaohs and tombs. But the deeper mystery lies in their silence. The Great Pyramid's alignment with true north is accurate to within a fraction of a degree. Its proportions encode the dimensions of the Earth and the golden ratio. Even its chambers resonate with frequencies that amplify sound in ways modern acousticians are only beginning to understand. Some researchers suggest these were not tombs, but instruments, harmonic structures that interacted with the planet's own vibration. If so, then the builders were not merely engineers, but physicists, composers of stone and resonance. The same architectural language appears elsewhere, as though a forgotten grammar once unified the world. Trilithons in Malta, dolmens in Korea, standing stones in Britain, and cyclopean walls in Greece all share an understanding of balance, symmetry, and celestial alignment. Were these coincidences born of parallel evolution or remnants of a shared memory? There are scholars who propose a prehistoric global culture, a civilization that once mapped the heavens, measured the earth, and left its knowledge inscribed in megaliths. The evidence is scattered, but the echoes are clear. When one studies these sites long enough, a strange pattern emerges. The farther back in time we go, the more sophisticated the construction seems. Later generations built smaller, simpler, less aligned. It is as though knowledge decayed, not advanced, a reversal of the narrative we tell ourselves about progress. Perhaps civilization is not a ladder at all, but a heartbeat, rising to brilliance, collapsing into darkness, and rising again. Some researchers believe that sound itself may have been the key. Experiments with ancient sites reveal acoustic effects that defy coincidence. Certain frequencies make stone vibrate, dust levitate, or balance shift. The megaliths of Malta hum when struck. The chambers of the Great Pyramid amplify low tones, and the stones of Stonehenge respond to percussion like a resonant instrument. Did the ancients know how to move stone through resonance, to manipulate vibration as an energy source? Mythologies speak of songs that raised mountains, trumpets that brought down walls, words that shaped the world. Could these myths be distorted recollections of a lost science, an understanding that matter and sound are one and the same? Even Plato hinted that geometry was sacred, that creation itself was mathematical. In Egypt, priests guarded measurements as divine secrets. In Sumer, builders inscribed harmonic ratios into temple blueprints. To them, architecture was not construction, it was communion. Every pillar, every angle, every alignment to the solstice or stars was a conversation between heaven and earth. Modern engineering seeks efficiency. Ancient engineering sought eternity. There are those who believe these monuments were more than memorials. They were machines, not of gears and levers, but of intention. Devices designed to stabilize, focus, or store energy, perhaps from the Earth's magnetic field, or the human mind itself. Such ideas live on the margins of science, but their appeal endures because the monuments themselves endure.
When we stand beneath those stones, something in us stirs, a sense of recognition, as though our bones remember what our minds have forgotten. In the 19th century, explorers described Baalbek and Egypt with reverence, suggesting the builders were heirs to an older, vanished race. Today, we dismiss such ideas as colonial fantasy or pseudoscience. Yet the discomfort remains. We cannot fully explain how these feats were achieved. We can only measure them, photograph them, simulate them, and still they remain beyond replication. Perhaps the mystery persists because it is not only mechanical, but philosophical. These builders may not have sought power or conquest, but continuity, a way to leave a mark that even extinction could not erase. As centuries pass, their work continues to outlive us. Empires have fallen around these stones. Religions have risen and dissolved, and yet the architecture endures, calm and indifferent. It is possible that the builders knew this would happen, that permanence could only be achieved through anonymity. They carved not to be remembered, but to ensure that something, anything, would survive forgetting. So as you listen now, and the night wraps softly around you, imagine those builders standing under an ancient sky. No names, no nations, only the rhythm of hammer on stone and the hum of stars overhead. They might not have called themselves human. They might not have called their work architecture. But they understood something we no longer do. That stone is not lifeless, that it carries intention like breath within its weight. When you next see a monument older than language, run your fingers across its surface and listen, not for the wind, but for the pulse beneath it. The architects of stone are gone, but their work still speaks in vibration, in geometry, in the quiet insistence that nothing truly disappears. And somewhere deep within that echo, the same question resounds. Were they building for themselves or for us? Long before history was written, it was sung. Before ink, there was voice. Before parchment, there was memory. The oldest records we possess are not inscriptions on stone or clay, but stories told and retold until they became part of the human pulse. Myth, scholars say, is not history.
Yet, when the same myths appear again and again across oceans and continents, wearing different names but sharing the same bones, we begin to wonder whether they are fragments of a single story, one the Earth itself once lived. Every civilization begins its tale with a fall. The Sumerians wrote of kings who reigned for tens of thousands of years before a great flood swept them away. The Egyptians spoke of divine dynasties before the age of men. The Maya remembered the destruction of previous worlds by fire and water. In India, the Mahabharata and the Puranas describe cycles of yugas, ages that rise, decay, and end in cataclysm. And the Greeks, through Plato, gave us Atlantis, a luminous island of knowledge drowned in one terrible night. We have treated these as allegories, as moral instruction or metaphor. But what if myth was never meant to teach? It was meant to warn. In Sumer, the flood was sent by the gods to erase a civilization that had grown arrogant. In Genesis, the same flood cleansed the earth of corruption. The details differ, but the pattern holds. A golden age, a descent into hubris, and a deluge that resets the world. Archaeology confirms that around 12,000 years ago, the world did indeed experience sudden floods and climate shifts. The end of the last ice age, glacial meltwaters surged into the oceans, erasing coastlines and flooding fertile plains. Perhaps this was the origin of the flood memory. Yet the persistence of the same narrative suggests something deeper. An echo of a catastrophe larger than any one region, one that might have ended a world, not just a village. Myths are like fossils of language. They preserve impressions of truths long dissolved. In the Rig Veda, there are verses that describe skies darkened by ash, the sun obscured, the stars out of place. The Popol Vuh of the Mir tells of a time when the earth trembled and the sky fell. Aboriginal Dreamtime stories in Australia speak of the sea rising to swallow the land, of thunder that split the mountains. When these oral traditions align with geological evidence, impact craters, sudden extinctions, and oceanic rise, they cease to be coincidences. They become data disguised as devotion. And then there are the myths of teachers who arrived after the flood. In Mesopotamia, Oasians, the fishman, emerged from the sea to bring law, writing, and agriculture. In Mesoamerica, Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, came from the east to restore civilization. In Egypt, ibis-headed god of wisdom appeared after chaos to rebuild order. These figures are not conquerors, they are restorers. They carry knowledge that seems already ancient, as though salvaged from a previous age. Could they be cultural memories of survivors, beings, human or otherwise, who remembered what had been lost? Some historians interpret these myths as symbolic representations of the dawn of culture, personifications of knowledge itself. Yet there is something strangely consistent in the details. The same motifs appear in every continent: celestial visitors, floods, fire, the rebuilding of time. It is as though humanity, scattered and broken, kept retelling the same ancestral trauma until it became religion. Perhaps what we call gods were once simply those who remembered when no one else could. In myth, knowledge is always both gift and curse. Prometheus steals fire from the heavens and is punished. Eve eats from the tree of knowledge and is cast out. Quetzalcoatl brings wisdom but is betrayed. Every culture carries a story of forbidden knowledge, something once possessed, then taken away. Some say this reflects our fear of mortality, our awareness of loss. But it could also reflect an actual rupture in human continuity, a time when knowledge itself was purged, whether by catastrophe or by intention. The myths, then, would be encryption stories, encoded to survive illiteracy, censorship, or apocalypse. Take, for example, the myth of the Tower of Babel. Humanity, united by a single tongue, builds a tower that reaches heaven. The gods scatter them, shatter their language, and erase their unity. Linguistically, it explains the diversity of tongues. Symbolically, it may describe something far older, a memory of a global civilization fractured by disaster. The loss of language could be the loss of shared understanding, a reset in which survivors became isolated tribes, forced to begin again. In ancient Greece, Hesiod wrote of the 5 ages of man: golden, silver, bronze, heroic, and iron. Each age declined from the harmony of the first to the misery of the last. The Hindus describe the same descent through the yugas, from Satya Yuga, the age of truth, to Kali Yuga, the age of darkness. In both systems, time is not linear but cyclical, each cycle ending in destruction and renewal. The notion of progress, so cherished by modernity, is absent. Instead, there is a rhythm, a cosmic heartbeat of creation and forgetting. Mythologists like Messiah Eliade once suggested that humanity is haunted by the memory of paradise, a state of perfect order, now lost. Archaeologists might interpret that as nostalgia for early stability, but perhaps it is literal memory, a time when knowledge, environment, and consciousness were in alignment. Maybe the builders of Göbekli Tepe, the astronomers of Nabta Plir, and the pyramid architects of Giza were not separate cultures, but echoes of a single inheritance.
The remnants of that mythic age, remembered in stone because language had not yet healed. Even today, mythology shapes our perception of reality more than we admit. The story of progress, of technology saving us, is itself a modern myth. A retelling of Prometheus, a rebranding of the quest for divine fire. We believe we are climbing higher, but myths whisper otherwise, that each ascent carries the seed of collapse. The ancients may have understood that truth better than we do. They encoded it in cycles, rituals, and allegories, an instruction manual for survival that we've mistaken for superstition. What if myth is not fantasy at all, but the operating system of human memory? a form of long-term storage designed for errors when libraries burn and archives drown. When catastrophe returns, myths will be what remain, the compressed files of consciousness waiting to be unzipped by those who come next. In that sense, myth is not the opposite of history. It is its shadow, following every civilization until the end. As you lie still now, breathing with the rhythm of your own heart, imagine those ancient storytellers seated beneath unfamiliar stars. Around their fires they spoke of the world before the flood, of the beings who walked with the gods, of the knowledge that had been lost but not forgotten. The words drift upward like sparks into the night, merging with the constellations. We call them myths, but perhaps the stars remember them as coordinates, each one pointing to a truth buried beneath the dust of ages. And as those sparks fade into the quiet dark, one question remains, suspended like breath in the cold. What if every story we have ever told is not imagination reaching backward, but memory trying to return home? There is a moment in every age when the sky seems to turn against the earth, when the familiar rhythm of sun and season falters, and the world breathes in, holding its breath before exhaling catastrophe. Myths remember it as the flood, the fire, the fall of stars. Geologists call it the Younger Dryas, a sudden, violent return to ice. Yet the deeper one looks, the more it feels less like an accident of nature and more like a reset, a deliberate punctuation in the long sentence of civilization. 12,800 years ago, something struck the planet. Across North America, layers of black sediment mark a horizon of destruction. Scorched soil, melted minerals, nanodiamonds formed by intense heat. These clues tell of impact, comet or asteroid fragments that exploded in the atmosphere, igniting wildfires across continents and plunging the planet into a 1,000-year winter. The temperature fell, the ice returned, and whatever fragile order humanity had begun to build was swept away. Forests burned, megafauna vanished, and sea levels surged. It was as if Earth herself had pressed the reset button. Some researchers, like the team behind the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, see in this event the erasure of an early civilization, perhaps the very one remembered in flood myths. Their theory is controversial. Mainstream science hesitates, for evidence is scattered and incomplete. Yet across the world we find the same geological scar, the same soot layer, the same pattern of loss. In the years that followed, agriculture and architecture reappeared seemingly from nowhere. It is as if survivors emerged from the edges of devastation, carrying fragments of forgotten knowledge. The ice retreated, and from the ruins of that silence, places like Göbekli arose. Sophisticated structures, appearing too soon, too suddenly. No slow evolution of skill, no learning curve, just mastery. Perhaps these builders were not inventing civilization, but remembering it. Perhaps they were reassembling what they once knew, guided by memory as old as grief. To imagine such a reset is to imagine a world erased so completely that even memory collapses. When glaciers melt, they grind mountains to powder. When seas rise, they bury cities in silence. The sediment of time covers everything equally, truth and myth alike. In such moments, the world does not end, it forgets. Civilization does not die, it dissolves into myth, into DNA, into the subconscious whisper of a species haunted by something it cannot name. Evidence of ancient trauma lingers in landscapes.
In Greenland's ice cores, scientists found a spike in platinum, a metal rare on Earth but common in cosmic debris, dating precisely to the Younger Dryas boundary. In North America, mammoths, camels, and horses vanished in a geological blink. Clovis culture, with its distinct spear points and artistry, disappeared overnight. And yet new cultures rose almost immediately after, as if filling the void with a borrowed flame. That speed of recovery hints not at ignorance, but at survival. Humanity is resilient, but resilience has a cost: amnesia. To begin again, one must forget. The survivors of that cataclysm, whoever they were, may have carried memories too painful to record. Their descendants spoke instead through myth, turning disaster into a parable. The flood became divine punishment. The fire became judgment. The darkness became lesson. But beneath the symbolism lies the physical truth. A sky ablaze, an ocean rising, a species watching its reflection in the water vanish. Plato's account of Atlantis describes its destruction in a single day and night of misfortune. He places it 9,000 years before his own time, around the same period as the Younger Dryas. He speaks of an advanced culture, proud and radiant, erased by waves and earthquakes. Whether allegory or memory, his timeline aligns uncannily with the geological record.
Some dismiss the coincidence. Others feel the resonance too deeply to ignore. After the reset, the planet changed. Sea levels rose, climates shifted, coastlines redrew themselves. The Sahara, once fertile, began to dry. The Fertile Crescent emerged as refuge. Across Asia, river valleys filled with life again. In this new world, humanity began to build differently, less monumental, more cautious. Yet, even in these early efforts, echoes of precision remain. Alignments to solstices, proportions that mirror those of lost megaliths. It is as though the blueprint survived, even when the architects did not. Some believe that such resets are cyclical, that Earth moves through cosmic seasons, governed by impact, solar flares, or shifts in magnetic field. Ancient texts describe them as ages: the Mayan Baktuns, the Hindu Yugas, the Greek ages of man. Each ends in destruction. Each begins in silence. To those ancient observers, the heavens were not distant. They were clocks. The stars told not only the time of night, but the time of civilization itself. If such cycles exist, then what of us? We live in an age of rising temperatures, melting ice, and unpredictable storms. The same elements that once drowned a world are stirring again. Perhaps this is coincidence, or perhaps the rhythm of catastrophe is returning. If so, what wisdom might we recover from those who faced it before? Some fragments remain, warnings carved in stone, myths of humility, temples aligned with stars that mark celestial resets. They all say the same thing in different tongues. Do not forget what the sky can do. Modern science, too, listens to the heavens, tracking near-Earth objects that glide silently past. Each orbit is a reminder that the cosmos does not negotiate. It gives and it takes according to its own indifferent geometry. And yet, within that indifference lies balance. Without catastrophe, there is no renewal. Without erasure, no rediscovery. The reset of the world, terrifying as it seems, may be the pulse that keeps life from stagnating. Perhaps the loss of ancient civilizations was not punishment, but pruning, an opportunity for consciousness to grow in new directions. Still, the thought lingers that what was lost then may have been wiser,
more attuned to harmony than we are now. When you look at the stars tonight, remember that they have seen it all before. They watched ice bury continents, comets ignite skies, oceans swallow continents. They have witnessed our rise and will one day witness our fall. And yet, somewhere in that endless cycle, perhaps there is also continuity, a seed carried through each reset, waiting for the right moment to awaken again. As the night grows quiet and your thoughts begin to drift, imagine the planet not as a victim of disaster, but as a living being turning in its sleep. The resets, the floods, the fires, perhaps they are dreams cleansing old memories to make room for new. The earth forgets so that it can remember differently, and we, caught within its dreaming, mistake each awakening for a beginning. The silence that follows every cataclysm is not emptiness, it is potential. Out of it, life returns. Stones are raised again. Stories are retold. Each age believes it is the first, unaware that it is simply the next verse in a song older than the mountains. And so the question remains, quiet and patient as the stars themselves. When the world resets once more, will we remember what was forgotten? Or will we too become the myth whispered by those who come after? There are maps in this world that should not exist. Maps that chart coastlines buried under ice, islands that sank before history began, and mountain ranges drawn with impossible precision. They whisper of a geography the world no longer remembers, as if the hands that traced them belong to those who once walked on Earth arranged differently. To look upon these maps is to glimpse a ghostly planet, one that exists somewhere between myth and geology. And yet they are real. Ink and parchment preserved against the decay of centuries. The most famous of these is the Piri Reis map, drawn in 1513 by an Ottoman admiral and cartographer. It was discovered centuries later in the archives of Istanbul. A fragment of gazelle skin covered with delicate calligraphy. At first glance, it appears to be a normal map of the Atlantic world, Europe, Africa, and the newly found Americas. But along its southern edge, there is something that should not be there. The unmistakable outline of Antarctica, drawn not as it appears now, buried under miles of ice, but as it would look, ice-free. Its rivers, valleys, and mountains clearly shown. When modern scientists compared the map to seismic surveys of the Antarctic bedrock, the match was startling. Yet the ice sheet covering that continent has been frozen for at least 6,000 years, long before recorded history. Piri Reis himself claimed his chart was compiled from 20 ancient source maps, some dating back to the time of Alexander the Great. Those sources have never been found. If they existed, then they carried knowledge of global coastlines thousands of years before Magellan's circumnavigation, before any known civilization possessed such navigational skill. How could that be? Historians suggest the shapes might be coincidence, that the Antarctic outline was merely a distorted depiction of South America. But the precision of latitude, the proportion of landmass, it all feels deliberate. It feels remembered. The mystery deepens with the Aransfina map of 1531, which also portrays Antarctica, again ice-free, with mountain ranges identical to those later confirmed by radar imaging. Then there is the BAC map of 1737, which divides the continent into two land masses separated by a waterway, exactly where modern studies have found subglacial channels. Each map, centuries apart, echoes the same hidden geography. Coincidence multiplies until it becomes indistinguishable from intention. If these cartographers were copying from older sources, who were the original surveyors?
Some researchers, following the ideas of Charles Hapgood, propose that a forgotten maritime civilization once mapped the world when sea levels were lower, perhaps before the cataclysm that ended the last ice age. Hapgood called it Earth crust displacement, suggesting the poles had shifted, moving Antarctica from a temperate region to its current frozen position. Albert Einstein, fascinated by the theory, wrote in cautious support, noting that sudden shifts of the Earth's crust could indeed explain dramatic climate changes in prehistory. If Hapgood was right, then the world the ancients mapped was not ours, but an earlier version, one wiped away when the planet itself turned over. Skeptics argue that such ideas romanticize error. They remind us that ancient sailors lacked the instruments for precise latitude or longitude, that maps were often creative extrapolations. And yet, ancient peoples navigated oceans long before we believed possible. Polynesians crossed thousands of miles using only stars, currents, and memory. Phoenicians circumnavigated Africa in 600 BCE. Egyptians traded with lands beyond the Red Sea. Why not imagine others, older still, who mastered the sea when the world's shorelines were different? The ocean keeps no record of its travelers. Other cartographic anomalies compound the riddle. The Zeno map of 1380 shows Greenland free of ice, split into multiple islands. The Contino planisphere of 1502 contains an accurate depiction of the South American coastline drawn years before Europeans reached that latitude. The Ahmed map from 1559 traces the entire Pacific coast of the Americas long before explorers completed that route. Scholars explain these as guesswork or imaginative projection, but the repetition is uncanny. It is as if an ancient master template was copied again and again through time, distorted with each translation but never entirely lost. Perhaps these maps are not merely geographical, but philosophical. They depict not just land, but memory, how civilizations perceive their place on the planet. A map is an act of control, of claiming to know the shape of the unknown. For the ancients to draw the world so completely, they must have possessed not only exploration, but awareness, a global vision rarely achieved even now. Could this awareness have survived from a time before the seas rose, when continents were closer and the stars in slightly different positions? Could the myths of a global flood simply mark the moment when the last of these maps became useless, when coastlines vanished overnight? The Library of Alexandria once held thousands of scrolls, including maps drawn from every known culture. When it burned, a world's memory turned to smoke. Yet fragments endured, hidden in monastic vaults, copied by Arab scholars, carried along trade routes, and eventually resurfacing in Renaissance Europe. It is tempting to believe that within those scrolls were remnants of knowledge far older than Greece or Egypt, knowledge that remembered an age when the world had been fully charted. The forbidden cartographers, as some call them, might not have been men at all, but epochs, civilizations acting as minds across time, each rediscovering the world's body, each mapping it anew before vanishing beneath its skin. The repetition of form, the same mountains, the same rivers, suggests the continuity of perception, as if humanity itself were remembering through its own hands. Consider the act of mapping as a metaphor for consciousness. To draw a coastline is to define the border between known and unknown. To map the world ice-free is to imagine it alive, unburdened by the cold amnesia of epochs. Perhaps those ancient cartographers were not predicting geography, but remembering it. Their maps an echo of landscapes once seen, once walked, long before our current age began. In recent years, satellite data has revealed subglacial formations beneath Antarctica that mirror those ancient drawings almost perfectly. Mountain chains, ridges, and river valleys. The more we learn, the more the old maps seem less fanciful. It is as though the planet itself keeps re-revealing what humans once knew, only to let us forget again. What frightens historians most is not the existence of these anomalies, but their implication. That knowledge can move backward in time, that memory can precede the mind that recalls it. The forbidden cartographers did not merely chart the world, they charted its recurrence. If they knew the Earth would shift, that seas would rise and bury their civilizations, perhaps the maps were their message in a bottle, a way of saying, we were here, and we knew the shape of the world you would inherit. As you listen now in the quiet hours between waking and sleep, imagine one of those ancient map makers bent over a parchment of tanned skin, tracing coastlines illuminated by lamplight. The ink glistens like memory itself. Outside, waves lap against a harbor long vanished. He is not drawing for his time, he is drawing for ours. Each curve of the pen is an act of preservation, a plea against oblivion. The map is folded, sealed, passed through centuries. Empires rise, languages die, libraries burn. And one day, in a dusty archive, it is found again, its ink faded but legible, its message unchanged. You hold it now, tracing your finger along the ghostly outline of an ice-free Antarctica, and the air feels suddenly older. Because in that moment, you realize that knowledge does not belong to the present, it only visits. And so the question emerges, vast and silent as the frozen continent itself. If they once mapped the world we are only beginning to rediscover, what else did they know that we have yet to remember? There are moments when the Earth yields a fragment that feels alive, an object too precise for its supposed age, too deliberate for coincidence. A bronze gear encrusted in coral, a tube of polished iron embedded in coal, a wheel-shaped imprint in sandstone 100 million years old. These are whispers of something mechanical from a world that should have known nothing of machinery. If we listen carefully, we may hear the faint hum of forgotten engines echoing across epochs. The sea off Greece was calm in the spring of 1901 when sponge divers stumbled upon a Roman-era shipwreck. Among the statues, they found a corroded mass of bronze, small, fragile, and astonishingly complex. Decades later, X-rays revealed an intricate arrangement of gears, dials, and inscriptions. It was the Antikythera Mechanism, a device built 2,000 years ago capable of predicting lunar phases, eclipses, and planetary movements. Scientists have called it the world's first analog computer. Its gears were cut with precision measured in fractions of a millimeter, each tooth meshing like clockwork. For centuries, no machine approached its sophistication. It was as if the technology had appeared, fully formed, and then vanished again for 1,000 years. Who made it, and from what lineage of knowledge did it descend? Historians attribute it to Greek genius, perhaps to Archimedes or Hipparchus. Yet no other artifact of such mechanical mastery has ever been found from that time. The Greeks recorded philosophy, architecture, and war, but not the machining techniques required for such instruments. The mechanism feels less like an invention and more like a rediscovery, a fragment of something older that resurfaced briefly before sinking back into the sea. Far-end anomalies provoke deeper unease. In 1938, Austrian engineer Franz Wiedenreich examined tiny metallic tubes found in Cretaceous chalk millions of years before humanity's emergence. In France, near Saint-Jean-d'Eve, miners unearthed an iron cube embedded in coal seams dated to 300 million years old. The artifact's edges were sharp, its symmetry unnatural. Some dismissed it as modern contamination, others as natural mineral formation. But what unsettled researchers was not the cube itself. It was the pattern, the recurrence of geometry where none should exist. In ancient texts, there are echoes of machines so wondrous they blur the boundary between myth and engineering. The Vedic scriptures of India describe flying chariots called vimanas, propelled by mercury engines and capable of interplanetary travel. The Samarangan Sutradhara, a Sanskrit manuscript, contains references to devices powered by solar fire and gyroscopic wind. Scholars interpret these as metaphors, yet the descriptions align eerily with modern aerodynamics. In Egypt, wall carvings in the Temple of Hathor at Dendra
depict shapes resembling bulbs and filaments, leading some to speculate about lost technologies of light. The mainstream view calls them symbols of creation, but symbolism often conceals memory. Even the stones themselves hinted an understanding of energy. In the Andes, blocks of diorite, one of the hardest stones on Earth, were cut with precision, requiring diamond tools. Drill holes in granite at Abu Rosh Niswan show spiral striations matching the signature of high-speed rotary cutting. Yet officially the ancients possessed only copper chisels and sand. Archaeologists demonstrate that soft metals can, with effort, shape stone. But these perfect spirals, these machine-like symmetries, how were they made and why do they appear in every corner of the ancient world? There are also the vitrified forts of Scotland, hilltop strongholds whose walls were melted into glass. The conventional explanation is that invaders set fires intense enough to fuse rock. Yet controlled vitrification requires sustained temperatures exceeding 2,000 degrees Celsius, beyond the reach of primitive fire. Could these ruins be the byproduct of something else? An experiment or a catastrophe where power was released in ways we no longer understand? It is not that we lack evidence of intelligence, we lack a context for it. History assumes technological progress is linear, that once knowledge appears, it accumulates. But what if it oscillates? What if civilizations rise to mastery, then vanish so thoroughly that even their machines turn to myth?
The Antikythera Mechanism might not be unique. It might simply be one survivor from an unremembered lineage. Some scientists studying ancient metallurgy have found evidence of alloys too advanced for their time. In India's Iron Pillar of Delhi, corrosion resistance rivals modern stainless steel. In China, fragments of the Han Dynasty's bronze weapons reveal chromium coating techniques not replicated until the 20th century. Even in pre-Columbian America, gold-platinum alloys were produced through methods that remain uncertain. These are not coincidences. They are signatures of knowledge carried through shadowed channels, preserved in guilds, temples, or secret lineages that outlived their empires. The notion of ancient machines often conjures fantasies of alien intervention, but perhaps the truth is more intimate. Maybe the intelligence was ours, belonging to an earlier humanity that reached a different kind of technological zenith, one attuned to resonance, frequency, and geometry rather than combustion and circuitry. The machines of the ancients may not have been metallic engines at all, but harmonic instruments manipulating sound, magnetism, and light. Their legacy could be the strange acoustics of pyramids, the magnetic anomalies of megaliths, or the piezoelectric hum of quartz temples. If this sounds impossible, consider how much of our own technology would appear supernatural if buried for a few millennia. A smartphone encased in settlement would one day be mistaken for crystal, a circuit board for patinated jade. A satellite fragment discovered eons hence might be interpreted as a god's relic. Technology stripped of context becomes mythology. Perhaps the myths of flying chariots, thunder weapons, and divine light are not imagination, but archaeology viewed through the fog of time. The ancients may have understood that machines need not dominate nature. They could harmonize with it. Their temples align with magnetic north. Their pyramids mirror constellations. Their materials resonated frequencies matching the Earth's Schumann resonance. We see architecture. They may have seen circuitry. Each pillar, each chamber, a component of an immense organic machine that harnessed not electricity, but vibration. Perhaps energy was once understood as a living thing, not a resource, but a relationship. If civilization has risen and fallen more than once, then every discovery we make now might be a rediscovery. Our laboratories echo their workshops. Our physics may be their philosophy reborn.
We think ourselves advanced because we measure atoms, but they may have listened to them. The machines of the ancients, if they existed, were not made to conquer, but to commune, to amplify the dialogue between mind, matter, and cosmos. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine walking through a silent ruin at twilight. The air is still, yet you feel vibration underfoot, a hum just below hearing. The stones seem to breathe. Perhaps the mechanism is not broken. It is simply waiting. Waiting for the right tone, the right presence to awaken it. The rusted gears of Antikythera, the polished drill marks of Giza, the glass-walled fortresses of Scotland, all might be fragments of a forgotten engineering of consciousness. We look upon them as relics of superstition, but what if they were once the instruments of harmony? The question hums, as quiet as the vibration of stone in moonlight. If we could remember how they worked, would we find machines that powered cities, or machines that once tuned the human soul to the rhythm of the stars? Long before alphabets, there were marks. Before writing, there were symbols. Before speech, there was resonance. The pulse of meaning felt, rather than spoken. Every civilization inherits this silent language, though most forget how to read it. Across caves, cliffs, and stones, the same signs appear again and again. Spirals, lines, eyes, suns, waves, hands reaching outward. They predate culture, empire, even humanity's recorded thought. Who first carved them, and why do they feel so familiar, as if they belonged not to any one people, but to the planet itself? In 1961, deep in the Balkans, archaeologists unearthed clay tablets from the ancient Vinca culture. Etched into them were symbols, repetitive, ordered, deliberate. They were not pictures, but patterns, resembling an early script dated to nearly 7,000 years ago. They predate Sumerian cuneiform by millennia. Linguists debated whether they represented words or rituals, records or prayers. But one thing was certain: they spoke of abstraction, of mind trying to structure thought. Some scholars dismissed them as proto-writing, an evolutionary dead end. Yet those signs, when compared to markings found in distant Egypt and the Indus Valley, reveal striking similarities. It is as though humanity once shared a universal symbolic language before branching into dialects of stone. Travel farther east, and the Indus symbols whisper the same rhythm. Thousands of seals unearthed in Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa bear engravings that no one has ever deciphered. Short strings of symbols repeating with mathematical precision. Some appear on tools, others on pottery or jewelry, suggesting both communication and identity. Attempts to translate them using Dravidian or Sanskrit roots fail.
The script stands outside known linguistic families like a voice from another consciousness. Archaeologists call it a mystery. Linguists call it noise. But perhaps it is memory. Traces of a language that spoke to more than just the ear. Long before these cities, in the Paleolithic caves of Europe, artists painted spirals, dots, lattices, and curves alongside the animals they hunted. At first glance, they seem decorative, but modern research shows they correlate to lunar cycles and migratory seasons. The dots may have recorded time itself. Even 30,000 years ago, humans were translating nature into pattern, encoding cosmic rhythm into pigment. They were not merely painting animals, they were writing the grammar of existence. Across the oceans and the deserts of North America, petroglyphs tell similar stories. Spiral motifs carved into basalt mirror those found in Neolithic Europe. Aboriginal rock art in Australia features grids and snake-like forms that resemble wave interference patterns. These shapes are not random, they are echoes of a shared perception.
Psychologists studying trance states note that the human brain produces geometric visions, zigzags, spirals, lattices, under the influence of altered consciousness. It is as if, before language, humans spoke through geometry, through the architecture of the mind itself. If there truly was a pre-verbal civilization, its communication might not have relied on words at all. Language as we know it divides, one sound for one meaning, one sentence for one thought, but symbols unify. A spiral can signify the sun, growth, journey, or infinity all at once. It does not explain, it evokes. Perhaps this was the first form of human telepathy, not mind reading, but shared resonance, a way of perceiving the same vibration, the same truth, without translation. Ancient myths hint at such a time. In the story of Babel, humanity once spoke with one tongue until that unity was broken. In Hindu cosmology, the universe itself was created by vibration. Om, the sound before sound. The Egyptians believed Thoth, god of writing, did not invent words, but captured the divine breath. The Mayans taught that speech was sacred because it echoed creation. These are not metaphors. They are memories of when communication was not a tool, but a state of being. If this sounds abstract, consider music. Long before writing, humans made instruments, bone flutes, drums, stringed harps, each capable of transmitting emotion across distance. Sound bypasses intellect. It travels directly to memory. Perhaps the ancients knew that frequency could carry meaning more efficiently than symbols. Perhaps language as we know it is the degraded residue of a once more complete form of communication, one that wove emotion, geometry, and resonance together. In the ruins of Çatalhöyük, one of the world's earlier cities, excavations reveal walls covered in patterns, repeating chevrons, waveforms, hands pressed in ochre. There are no words, no numbers, yet the designs recur with ritual precision, as if recording something not to be read, but to be felt. Maybe this was their script, a tactile language of memory, where each pattern was a vibration meant to realign the mind. Modern researchers studying cymatics, the visible patterns formed by sound frequency, symbols, spirals, stars, hexagons, all emerge from vibration. This has led some to suggest that early humans might have drawn what they heard during rituals or natural phenomena. Thunder, wind, or chanting could have translated into visual codes. The first written language, then, was not about ideas, but harmonics, a transcription of the universe's music. If the ancients communicated through resonance, it might explain the uncanny similarities between distant cultures. The spiral of Newgrange and Ireland and the spiral of Chaco Canyon in New Mexico are separated by continents, yet nearly identical. Perhaps those who carved them were not copying, but remembering the same cosmic song. Language, in this sense, is not invention, but recollection. Each symbol, each sound is an echo of the universe trying to recognize itself. As civilizations grew, the symbols hardened into alphabets, and meaning fractured. Words replaced resonance, syntax replaced rhythm, and comprehension became separation. The unifying language was forgotten, but it lingers in art, in music, in dream. Every time we're moved by something we cannot describe, we're hearing it again, the language before words. What would it mean to recover it? Some physicists speak of a theory of everything, a single equation binding all forces of nature. Perhaps the ancients already glimpsed it, not in math, but in pattern. The spiral of a galaxy mirrors the curve of a shell. The frequency of a heart matches that of the Earth's electromagnetic field. Everything hums in sympathy. If language could once align with that hum, then to speak was to participate in creation itself.
Imagine for a moment that every word we utter leaves a trace, a vibration in the ether. Over millennia, those vibrations might accumulate, creating an invisible palimpsest around the planet, a record of everything ever said. Perhaps the ancient symbols are keys designed to unlock those frequencies, to tune consciousness back to the original resonance.
As you lie there now, breathing softly, imagine those early humans, not as primitive hunters, but as listeners, attuned to the frequencies of stars, rivers, and wind. They carved what they heard, not what they saw. Their language was the Earth's heartbeat, the magnetic pulse of life itself. And in that quiet moment before sleep takes you, ask yourself, if the first language was vibration, then are we speaking now, or only remembering the echo of a silence that once spoke for us all? When humanity first looked up, it was not with curiosity, but with recognition. The sky was not a ceiling, it was a mirror. In its quiet immensity, the ancients saw reflection, rhythm, and memory. Every star was a pulse of something familiar, yet unreachable, a reminder that existence did not begin on the ground, but in the movement of light itself. They did not look at the heavens as we do now, scientifically, mechanically, but as archivists of time. For them, the sky was a memory that remembered everything the Earth had forgotten. Even now, when we gaze at the constellations, we are looking into the past. The light from Sirius began its journey 8 years ago, from Deneb more than 2,000. The starlight that touches our eyes tonight began long before we were born, before our species even existed. Perhaps the ancients sensed this instinctively. Across cultures, they described the stars not as distant suns, but as ancestors, watchers who remembered what had been lost. And maybe they were right, because every night sky is an archive of vanished things, a memory so vast it can only speak in light. At Nab Deplier, deep in the Egyptian desert, a circle of stones stands weathered and quiet. Long before Stonehenge, long before the pyramids, people aligned these pillars with the rising of Orion and the summer solstice. They were herders, yet their knowledge of the stars rivaled that of later civilizations. They mapped the precession of the equinoxes, the slow wobble of Earth's axis that takes 26,000 years to complete. It was a concept not rediscovered until the time of Hipparchus. Yet the evidence stands silent in the sand. How did they know? Who told them to look so carefully? The same question haunts the great monuments of Giza. The 3 pyramids are aligned precisely with the 3 stars of Orion's belt, as they would have appeared around 2500 BCE, a date far older than their supposed construction. To some, this is coincidence. To others, it is a deliberate gesture, a message across millennia, synchronizing stone with sky. The shafts inside the Great Pyramid point directly to stars associated with rebirth and immortality. The structure is not merely a tomb. It is a map, a celestial machine designed to remind the Earth of its place among the heavens. Across the ocean, in the Andes, the Temple of the Sun at Machu Picchu aligns with the solstice sunrise, while the lines of Nazca stretch like constellations drawn upon the desert. Some figures seem designed to be seen only from the sky. Archaeologists call them ritual pathways, offerings to the gods. But what if they were coordinates, markers left by a civilization obsessed with the geometry of the heavens? What if they were writing, not to the gods above, but to the descendants below? The more we study ancient structures, the more the same pattern emerges: stellar alignment, cosmic precision, and obsession with cycles. The Maya tracked Venus with mathematical accuracy, predicting its position centuries in advance. The Chakawan people of North America
built their great kivas in alignment with lunar standstills that occur once every 18 years. At Angkor Wat, temples mirror the constellation Draco. At Teotihuacan, the Avenue of the Dead points to the Pleiades. These were not random acts of superstition. They were expressions of memory, as if each culture, awakened after a long sleep, was trying to re-establish contact with the cosmos it once knew intimately. The idea that ancient peoples understood precession, axial tilt, and stellar drift without modern instruments seems impossible. Yet, when viewed through the lens of continuity, it becomes inevitable. If knowledge survived from an earlier world, one destroyed by flood or fire, it would first manifest in the simplest form, looking up. The survivors, stripped of their technology, would still have the stars. In the absence of machines, they would build with what remained: stone, patience, and memory. Many myths describe humanity's teachers as beings who descended from the heavens. The Dogon of Marley speak of Nomo, amphibious creatures from the star Sirius, who brought cosmic knowledge. Long before telescopes, the Dogon described Sirius as a binary system, something only confirmed by modern astronomy in the 20th century. They knew its orbital period, its density, even its invisible companion. How? Skeptics claim coincidence, contamination by modern contact, or mythic metaphor. Yet the details are too precise, the timing too ancient. Perhaps their ancestors remembered what others forgot, that the stars are not just distant lights, but messengers from cycles long completed. To understand why the ancients built by the stars, we must remember that time itself was once celestial.
The sky was the first calendar, the first clock, precession, solstices, equinoxes. These were not scientific curiosities, but living reminders that all things move in rhythm. When the sky changed, humanity changed with it. Perhaps that is why so many ancient sites encode astronomical data that spans tens of thousands of years, data no single lifetime could observe. They were building for memory, not for themselves. They were ensuring that even if civilization reset, the stars would teach again. It is possible that this is the greatest inheritance of the ancient world, the understanding that we are not separate from the cosmos, but part of its pattern. Modern science calls it astrophysics. Ancient priests called it harmony. Where we see cold stars, they saw song, light vibrating through darkness. Some ancient temples were tuned to those vibrations. At New Grange in Ireland, sunlight penetrates the inner chamber for only a few minutes on the winter solstice, illuminating spirals carved on stone. At that moment, light and architecture merge, creating a resonance that feels less like ceremony and more like awakening. The temple becomes an instrument, the sun its musician. Even now, in our technological age, the stars continue to pull at us. We send probes and telescopes outward, desperate to rediscover what the ancients never forgot, that the cosmos is not out there, it is within. Every atom in our bodies was forged in stellar cores. We are quite literally the memory of the sky made flesh. When the ancients built pyramids aligned to Orion or temples facing Sirius, they were not worshiping distant gods. They were acknowledging kinship. But somewhere along the way, that connection frayed. The city lights drowned the stars. The rhythms of day and night turned mechanical. We began to see the sky as a map to conquer, rather than a mirror to understand. The memory of the sky faded from our language, replaced by coordinates, equations, and noise. Yet sometimes, on quiet nights, something ancient stirs. We look up, and for a heartbeat, we remember. Imagine yourself standing where the desert meets the horizon. Above you,
the constellations drift in slow procession, the same as they did 10,000 years ago. Somewhere within those points of light lies every story ever told, every life ever lived, every civilization ever forgotten. The ancients built their monuments to align with them because they understood the truth we often ignore, that nothing truly ends, it simply changes frequency. And as the darkness deepens and you feel the quiet weight of the cosmos pressing gently against your skin, you might realize that the stars are not watching us from afar. They are remembering us, just as we are beginning, finally, to remember them. So let the question drift upward as softly as a breath. If the sky is memory and we are its reflection, then when we look up at the stars, are we seeing our future or the memory of what we once were? History begins with names. Names etched into clay, carved into stone, whispered across temples. They mark the passage of kings and the boundaries of time. But sometimes the names stretch too far, into lifespans and reigns so immense they defy biology, reason, or chronology. They belong to figures who ruled for tens of thousands of years before the dawn of history, whose bloodlines blur the border between myth and record. These are the hidden genealogies, the chronicles that suggest civilization did not begin, but resumed. In the ruins of ancient Sumer, the oldest known civilization, archaeologists uncovered a document that should not exist. It is called the Sumerian King List. Written in cuneiform over 4,000 years ago, it catalogs the rulers of Mesopotamia before the flood, kings who reigned for impossibly long periods. Alulim, 28,800. Enmenluana, 43,200. In total, 8 kings ruled for 241,200 years before the deluge swept them away. After the flood, the reigns became shorter, human. The text states simply, "Then the flood swept over, and kingship descended from heaven once more." Scholars call it myth mixed with memory, a symbolic exaggeration of dynastic power. But the Sumerians treated it as history. The list was not fantasy, it was record. To them, the pre-flood kings were real, descended from divine ancestors who came from the sky to establish order. Their reigns were measured not by years, as we know them, but by something else, cycles perhaps, or the rhythm of celestial time. The implication is haunting, that civilization did not emerge from ignorance, but re-emerged after catastrophe, guided by remnants of something older and wiser. Other cultures preserve the same pattern. In Egypt, the Turin Papyrus records dynasties of shining ones and followers of Horus, ruling long before the first pharaohs. Manetho, a priest writing in the 3rd century BCE, divided Egypt's rulers into gods, demigods, and mortals, the gods reigning for thousands of years each. In India, the Puranas described the Saparshis, 7 sages who appeared after each world cycle to restore knowledge, teaching humanity the sciences of the stars and medicine. In the Andes, the Veracochus emerged after a great flood, tall and pale, bringing tools and order. Everywhere, the story repeats. After the deluge, the teachers returned. Modern historians dismiss these accounts as metaphor, a way of sanctifying kingship. But the mathematical consistency between them is difficult to ignore. The Sumerian pre-flood era of 241,200 years divides almost evenly into the precession of Earth's axis,
A cycle of roughly 25,920 years, repeated 9 times. Did the ancients encode astronomy into their king lists? Or did they inherit records from an age when years were measured differently? perhaps by lunar cycles, perhaps by something more cosmic. When ancient scribes wrote that kingship descended from heaven, what did they mean? The phrase may not refer to gods at all, but to knowledge, leadership bestowed by those who remembered. If a previous civilization perished, its survivors might have appeared to later humans as divine. Their mastery of agriculture, metallurgy, and law indistinguishable from magic. The Sumerian gods, Enki, Enlil, Inanna, were described as both celestial and tangible, ruling cities, crafting laws, instructing mankind. They were said to live extraordinarily long lives, yet they were not eternal. They aged, quarreled, and died. They were mortal in some forgotten sense of the word. Texts from Babylon speak of tablets of destinies, records held by the gods that contained the laws of creation, the command of the elements, and the fate of kingdoms. Similar objects appear in every mythology: the emerald tablets of Thule, the Book of Enoch's heavenly archives, the Aztec codices of time. Each implies that history is cyclical, that humanity inherits fragments of divine administration after every cataclysm. The keepers of these tablets, these genealogies, are not rulers in the ordinary sense. They are archivists of continuity. Even in the Bible, lifespans before the flood stretch beyond comprehension. Adam lives 930 years, Methuselah 969. After the flood, lifespans shortened dramatically. It mirrors the Sumerian pattern almost exactly. The book of Genesis also names the sons of God who took mortal wives, the Nephilim, mighty men of old, men of renown. Some interpret them as mythic hybrids, others as symbolic unions between wisdom and ignorance. But their sudden disappearance after the deluge fits the same rhythm of erasure and reset. In Greece, Hesiod wrote of the golden race of immortals, followed by silver, bronze, and iron. Each age shorter lived than the last. The pattern is universal. Long ages of greatness, followed by decline, compression, and forgetting. We are the children of brevity, born in the era when memory has faded, when the gods have become metaphors. But what if the metaphors conceal literal ancestry? What if the divine bloodlines were simply the remaining carriers of knowledge from a world that ended long before ours began? Genetic studies have revealed puzzling gaps in human evolution, bottlenecks where our population nearly vanished, followed by sudden bursts of diversity. Some scientists link these to environmental disasters, others to migrations from unknown populations. The idea of an external intervention is unprovable, yet the mythic language persists. Humanity created, awakened or gifted. The Sumerians said Enki shaped humans from clay mixed with the blood of gods. The Egyptians claimed Thoth restored speech to mankind after a time of silence. The Greeks credited Prometheus for stealing fire. These are not just myths of creation, they are myths of recreation, retellings of a single event repeated through different tongues. Perhaps the hidden genealogies are not about people, but about principles, cycles of awakening. Each name in the king lists could represent not an individual, but an epoch. Each reign the duration of an age of understanding. When consciousness reached its zenith, the world reset. The flood was not punishment, it was cleansing. Civilization began again, smaller, simpler, always remembering less. In that sense, the gods never left. They became us. Their knowledge diluted through time lives in intuition, in the sudden burst of insight we call genius.
Every great leap in art, science, or philosophy may be the surfacing of that ancient inheritance, the genetic memory of a species that has rebuilt itself countless times. When you look at ancient lists of rulers, try not to see names and numbers, but echoes. Imagine the long chain of hands passing torches through darkness, each believing they were the first to hold it. Somewhere along that chain, one link remains invisible, the one that connects myth to history. We call it lost civilization. The ancients may have called it home. So as you drift towards sleep, think of the names carved into clay 4,000 years ago, of the scribes who copied them by lamplight, whispering, "Before the flood, kingship descended from heaven." Perhaps they were not recording fantasy, but remembering fact through poetry. Perhaps they knew that truth cannot survive as data. It must hide in story, encoded where only dreamers will find it. And as your breath slows, let that story settle like dust upon the heart. If the gods were only ancestors who remembered more than we do, then when we finally remember everything, will we too become the gods of another world's beginning? Every civilization keeps its own version of the past, but few dare to admit how fragile memory truly is. History, as we read it, feels authoritative. Dates, dynasties, and discoveries arranged like stepping stones across time. Yet beneath that surface lies a quiet unease, an awareness that what we call history is not a mirror, but a mosaic. Broken pieces arranged to form a pattern we are meant to recognize.
The more one studies the archives of humanity, the clearer it becomes. History is not what happened, it is what survived, and what survived was chosen. In every age, those who control knowledge control the story of the world. When an empire rises, its first act is to rewrite time. Libraries are burned, monuments are defaced, languages are replaced. The victors inherit not only land, but memory itself. What is destroyed is forgotten. What is forgotten might as well have never existed. Every age rewrites the last, layering its truth upon the ashes of another's. By the time the modern mind arrived, most of the Earth's true chronicle had already been edited beyond recognition. The greatest library the ancient world ever knew, Alexandria, was reduced to smoke and silence. Within its walls were texts said to contain the sum of human and divine knowledge. Records from Egypt, Babylon, Greece, and perhaps even older worlds now unnamed. When it burned, the continuity of memory was broken. We mourn the flames, but we rarely ask who lit them or why. Perhaps the loss was not merely an accident of war. Perhaps it was an act of purification, a deliberate erasure of inconvenient truths. After Alexandria's fall, knowledge migrated underground, into monasteries, secret orders, and scriptoria guarded by the few who understood its power. During the Middle Ages, the Church became the guardian of history, deciding which texts were sacred and which were heresy. Countless scrolls were destroyed, rewritten, or redacted to align with doctrine. Pagan gods became demons, old sciences were called witchcraft, and timelines were compressed to fit biblical chronology. It was a reorganization of the human past, designed not to preserve truth, but to shape belief. The historian Josephus once wrote that even in his time, chroniclers altered records to please those in power. Centuries later, that warning remains relevant. Empires, like authors, edit the past to justify their existence. The Roman conquest of Europe was not merely military, it was cultural. Indigenous histories were overwritten, oral traditions replaced with Latin text. The new narrative began. Civilization came from Rome, not before it.
Anything older, grander, or incompatible with this lineage was dismissed as myth. But myths, as we have seen, are simply memories wearing masks. Beneath their symbols lie fragments of forbidden chronologies, traces of civilizations erased by conquest, flood, or deliberate amnesia. Consider the legends of Tartaria, whispered in old maps and manuscripts. An empire said to span Eurasia, its architecture colossal, its technology forgotten. By the 19th century, almost all references to it had vanished from mainstream history. The remaining maps were labeled fiction, the details dismissed as cartographic error. Yet the ruins across Central Asia and Siberia, vast star-shaped fortresses, buried cities, and empty canals still whisper another story. The rewriting of history is rarely absolute. It leaves ghosts. One finds them in mismatched timelines, in artifacts that appear centuries too advanced, in languages whose origins remain untraceable. Even our calendar bears the scars of manipulation. During the Gregorian reform of 1582, 10 days were erased to correct astronomical drift. Other cultures have altered time more drastically. Chinese dynasties reset their calendars with each new emperor. The Maya restarted theirs after every great cycle. Perhaps history itself is a system periodically rebooted, its records rewritten to reflect a new order. When explorers of the Enlightenment rediscovered ancient sites, they did so through the lens of their own age. They categorized ruins by style, assigned dates based on assumption, and declared linear progress as law. Anything that did not fit that narrative was ignored. The pyramids of Egypt were said to be tombs, though no bodies were found in the greatest of them. The megaliths of Peru were called Inca, though the Incor themselves claimed they were older. The mystery of the builders was rewritten as superstition. The idea of a forgotten high civilization, an antecedent, was quietly removed from academia's vocabulary. But fragments persisted. In the Vatican's secret archives, an immense labyrinth of sealed vaults, lie thousands of documents never shown to the public. Papal correspondence, heretical treatises, astronomical charts, and banned books. Some scholars who gained brief access in the 20th century spoke of texts describing pre-flood empires, celestial visitations, and technologies incompatible with our accepted timeline. Officially, these are legends. Yet the fact that such records were preserved, not destroyed, suggests that someone believed they were worth keeping, even if humanity was not yet meant to read them. If history is a palimpsest, then every discovery is a scratch through paint, revealing an older layer beneath. Each time archaeologists unearth something unexpected, advanced metallurgy in pre-dynastic Egypt, surgical tools in Neolithic Europe, batteries in Parthian ruins, it challenges the timeline. And each time, the anomaly is quietly explained away or reclassified. The rewritten chronicle is self-correcting, it resists contradiction. Yet the contradictions multiply. We have grown so accustomed to our linear story, primitive to modern, darkness to enlightenment, that we forget it was constructed. Before Renaissance Europe claimed to rediscover knowledge, that knowledge had already existed elsewhere, in the libraries of Baghdad, in the observatories of Samarkand, in the astronomical codices of the Maya.
Even the word rediscovery is a confession. It means memory lost and found again, never questioned for how it was lost to begin with. Maybe history is not written by the victors after all, but by survivors, those who remember just enough to start again, but not enough to threaten the cycle of forgetting. Every archive, every chronicle, every textbook is a mirror polished by someone's hand. What if there were once whole eras between our known ages? Civilizations that rose, burned, and were edited out of time so thoroughly that only myth remained.
The gaps are there, like missing pages in a cosmic diary. And perhaps this is why the study of forbidden history feels less like archaeology and more like mourning. We are mourning the worlds we will never fully know, the architects whose names were erased, the teachers recast as gods, the scientists condemned as heretics. The written record is not a timeline, it is a wound. We keep stitching it shut with each generation, afraid of what might bleed through if we look too closely. Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, imagine those hidden historians, the nameless scribes who, in the quiet hours, copied forbidden manuscripts by candlelight, knowing their work might one day be burned. They wrote for no one, yet perhaps for us. Each word was a seed buried against future forgetting. And now, when we read their echoes, we are the harvesters of memory, though we no longer recognize the garden. So the question lingers, faint but insistent at the edge of thought. If every age rewrites the last, then who, at the dawn of our own, decided where history should begin and what truths were left behind in the margins of time? There are patterns in history that move like shadows, subtle, recurring, and patient. They slip through wars, religions, and empires, carrying something older than memory itself. We call it tradition, instinct, intuition, or archetype. But beneath those names lies something more persistent: continuity, the whisper that flows beneath the noise of progress, reminding us that we have been here before. It appears in our myths, our architecture, our science, and even in the way we dream. It is the ghost of a forgotten inheritance, the faint heartbeat of a civilization that refuses to die even when its name is lost. Look closely, and you can feel it everywhere. The spiral carved into a Neolithic tomb reappears in the swirl of galaxies. The golden ratio that shapes a seashell also shapes cathedrals and DNA. Ancient chants echo in the harmonic frequencies used in modern physics. The same stories, retold under different skies. Gods who teach, floods that cleanse, stars that guide. They are not coincidences. They are memories disguised as culture, fragments of an earlier understanding that survived the fall of the worlds. Across generations, wisdom moves like a current beneath the surface of time. It survives not through institutions, but through symbols, rituals, and geometry. When knowledge cannot be written, it must be lived. When it cannot be spoken, it must be carved into stone, woven into myth, or hidden in proportion. The ancients seem to understand this law. The builders of temples and cathedrals, though separated by thousands of years, followed the same invisible rules of alignment and resonance, as if obeying a design older than civilization itself. In the 20th century, the Swiss architect, Le Corbusier, described something he called the modular man, a system of proportion rooted in the golden ratio and the human body. He believed it connected architecture to universal harmony. But that idea was not new. It was the same principle encoded in the pyramids, the Parthenon, and the temples of Angkor. Every sacred structure, regardless of culture, speaks the same mathematical language. It is as if architects across millennia were tuned to the same cosmic frequency, listening to the same whisper of continuity. Even art carries this inheritance. The mandalas of Tibet, the labyrinths of Crete, the crop circles of England, all share geometry that transcends geography. Psychologist Carl Jung called such patterns archetypes, forms embedded in the collective unconscious. He believed they emerge when the psyche reconnects with something primordial, something beyond time. Perhaps these recurring forms are not psychological projections at all, but echoes of an ancient communication system, a symbolic code left by ancestors who knew that shape and symmetry could transmit meaning across epochs. Science, too, seems to stumble upon ancient truths and call them new. Quantum physics tells us that everything in the universe vibrates, that matter is not solid but rhythmic. The ancients knew this without equations. They called it Alm, Logos, Prana, or Ki. They built temples that resonated at frequencies aligned with the Earth's magnetic pulse. They treated sound not as art, but as architecture, healing, and technology. When modern researchers measure the frequencies of ancient chambers, they find harmonics tuned to the same Schumann resonance that surrounds the planet. Coincidence or continuity? Even human consciousness follows cycles that mirror the heavens. Civilizations rise, fall, and rise again in patterns that seem almost astronomical.
Toynbee, the historian, called it challenge and response. The Vedas called it the Yugas. The Maya called it the long count. Whatever the name, the rhythm remains. When humanity drifts too far from balance, the world resets. But each time, something of the old world survives, some fragment of knowledge, intuition, or art. Like a seed carried in the pocket of a refugee, it takes root in new soil and grows again. You can see the survival most clearly in the smallest things. Symbols on coins, architectural details repeated unconsciously, rituals whose original meanings are forgotten but still performed. The handshake, the circle dance, the spiral in children's doodles, all ancient gestures reborn without instruction. We think of evolution as progress, but perhaps it is remembrance, patterns seeking restoration. Throughout history, a few individuals seem to have tapped directly into this continuity. Pythagoras claimed he could remember past lives spent in other civilizations. Leonardo da Vinci sketched inventions that would not exist for centuries, as if memory had outrun time. Nikola Tesla spoke of receiving ideas as transmissions, not thoughts. Mystics across cultures describe knowledge that arrives whole, unbidden, as though downloaded from an invisible archive. Maybe inspiration is not invention at all, but retrieval, memory surfacing from a deeper collective mind. In this light, the human brain becomes less a container of thought and more an antenna. Perhaps consciousness is a field shared by all beings, and every genius, prophet, or visionary is simply one who tunes in clearly. If so, then the whisper of continuity is not merely cultural, it is cosmic. It flows through DNA, through magnetic resonance, through the hidden architecture of atoms. It is the language of recurrence, the same idea rediscovered again and again under different names. The mystics of every age warned that knowledge without remembrance leads to ruin. When we forget our place in the cycle, we repeat the fall. The ancients encoded warnings in myth and proportion because they understood that memory fades faster than stone. Each age believes itself unique, yet the ruins we uncover remind us that others once thought the same. The whisper of continuity urges humility. It asks us to listen to what endures, not to what dominates. Perhaps the truest form of immortality is not individual, but civilizational. The soul of a culture survives not through its monuments, but through the quiet persistence of its symbols. When those symbols resurface, when a scientist rediscovers an ancient principle, or a poet writes words once carved into temple walls, that is continuity speaking. It is the pulse of the same mind moving through different vessels, learning and forgetting an endless rhythm. Imagine standing in a ruined temple at dawn.
The columns are broken, the inscriptions eroded, but the air still hums faintly. You place your hand upon the stone, and for a moment the vibration matches your heartbeat. You realize that this feeling has been felt before by the builders, the priests, the wanderers who came before you. You're not the observer of history, you're part of its bloodstream. The continuity has never been broken, it has only changed form. Maybe that is what eternity truly means, not an endless stretch of time, but the recurrence of truth. Not survival of the body, but the persistence of pattern. The whisper of continuity does not shout. It hums beneath thought, beneath culture, beneath the illusion of progress, calling us to remember what we never truly forgot. And so, as the night deepens and the stars drift slowly overhead, listen not to the noise of the world, but to the quiet rhythm beneath it. The same rhythm that built temples, wrote equations, and shaped dreams. The same rhythm that now moves in you. If we could follow that whisper to its source, what might we find? A first civilization? A cosmic architect? Or simply ourselves, endlessly remembering the same story through new voices? Every civilization dreams of eternity, but perhaps eternity dreams of us. Time moves forward only in appearance. Beneath its surface, memory circles endlessly, waiting to be recognized. The final illusion of progress is that we are moving away from the ancient world, when in truth we are moving back toward it, returning to a place we once knew through different eyes under a different sky. The future is only the past remembering itself. And tonight, in this quiet hour between waking and sleep, the memory begins to stir again. What happens when a species begins to remember collectively? When fragments, long scattered across millennia, start to align, myth with geology, scripture with astronomy, science with dream. We are living through that convergence now. Each discovery, each anomaly once dismissed as myth finds new life under modern scrutiny. Satellite imagery reveals vast geometric shapes beneath deserts and seas. DNA sequencing uncovers migrations older than any recorded nation. Cosmic background radiation whispers the same pattern found in ancient mandalas. It is as though memory itself is surfacing through every layer of human inquiry, reminding us that the story of civilization is neither beginning nor end, but recurrence. The ancients might have called it awakening. The Maya called it the return of the fifth sun. In Hindu cosmology, it is the close of Kali Yuga, the age of forgetting, followed by Satya Yuga, the age of truth.
Even Western mysticism carries the same prophecy. Apocalypse, in its oldest Greek meaning, means unveiling, not destruction, but revelation, the return of memory, the lifting of the veil that separated us from our own origin. If you listen closely, you can hear it in the collective hum of our time, the surge of curiosity for ancient knowledge, the revival of sacred geometry, the rediscovery of lost texts. We feel drawn, almost magnetically, toward the wisdom buried beneath centuries of dismissal. Something in us recognizes it without knowing why. We are like dreamers, half waking, grasping at fragments of a dream that feels more real than the world around us. The dream of an age when humanity walked in harmony with the cosmos, when architecture and astronomy were one, when science and spirit spoke the same tongue. Perhaps that is what memory truly is. Not recollection of fact, but resonance with pattern. When the same symbols, the same numbers, the same myths arise in every age, they do not repeat by accident. They repeat because they are alive. Memory is not static. It breathes through us, shaping our curiosity, our art, our longing. It does not return as history. It returns as intuition. And when enough hearts align with that intuition, civilizations change. The ancients spoke of cycles of awakening and sleep,
of consciousness expanding and contracting like the breath of the universe. If that is true, then we are standing at the inhale, the moment of remembrance. The forgotten truths of geometry, vibration, and consciousness are resurfacing, not through temples, but through technology. Our machines, though born of logic, increasingly resemble the architecture of the mind itself. Artificial intelligence mirrors ancient metaphors of divine creation, thought manifesting into form. Quantum physics describes a universe woven of observation and intention, echoing the same insight carved into temple walls millennia ago. That reality responds to awareness. It is tempting to think we're discovering these ideas for the first time, but perhaps like the flood survivors of old, we're only rediscovering what was once known and lost. The return of memory is not about nostalgia for vanished empires. It is about recovering the understanding that all things are connected, that consciousness and cosmos are reflections of the same infinite field, that the gods of old were not external beings, but facets of the same intelligence that now awakens within us. And yet, remembering is never without consequence. The ancients warned that knowledge without balance leads to ruin. Every golden age carries within it the seed of its own collapse. The Atlantean myth, the Tower of Babel, the fall of the men of renown, each as a story of remembrance turned to hubris. The same fire that illuminates can also burn. As memory returns, humanity stands again at the same threshold our ancestors once faced: to remember wisely or to repeat the forgetting. Still, there is hope in the rhythm of cycles. Forgetting, too, has purpose. It allows the eternal to experience itself anew, to rediscover wonder, to learn compassion. The amnesia of civilization is not a punishment. It is a kind of mercy. For without it, we would be crushed under the weight of what we have already lived. Perhaps the true wisdom lies not in remembering everything, but in remembering just enough to grow. When you trace the line of history, you can feel it bending inward, folding back toward the beginning. Our telescopes gaze deeper into space and find the universe as it was billions of years ago. Yet those distant lights are also the atoms in our own bodies.
We are looking at ourselves across time. Memory, then, is not confined to the mind. It is cosmic. Every cell, every photon, carries the record of what has been. And when consciousness matures enough to read it, history ceases to be a narrative and becomes experience. Imagine then that all the ruins, myths, and mysteries we have explored are not fragments of a dead civilization, but the scattered pages of our own autobiography. Imagine that Atlantis, Sumer, Egypt, and every other golden age were not separate epics, but chapters in a single recurring dream, a dream the earth keeps having until it learns to awaken fully. Perhaps the ancients were not warning us about the past at all. Perhaps they were reminding us of what comes next, because the return of memory is already happening. It happens each time someone looks beyond dogma and feels awe instead of fear. Each time a scientist admits that consciousness cannot be measured, only experienced. Each time a child looks at the stars and feels that strange ancient familiarity. It happens in quiet moments, in intuitions, in déjà vu, in the pull toward forgotten places. The earth itself may be remembering through us, her oldest children, reawakening to the rhythm she never lost. As the night folds around you, consider this. Perhaps you too are part of that memory returning, the curiosity that brought you here, the quiet stirring in your mind as these words unfold. It is not random. It is recognition. Somewhere deep within, you already know the truths that were buried and burned. You have always known them. They are written not in books, but in the geometry of your own heartbeat. Civilization may rise and fall, but consciousness endures. Memory does not die, it only sleeps, waiting for the next dawn. And now, as humanity stands once more beneath the same stars that watched its first awakening, perhaps the cycle is closing and the story is ready to begin again. The past is not behind us. It is beneath us, within us, and above us, folded like light across eternity.
And as the silence deepens, the question remains, soft and infinite as the breath of the cosmos itself. If the first civilization still lives within our memory, and we are only now beginning to awaken to it, then what happens when remembering is complete, and we finally recognize ourselves as the very ancients we have been searching for all along?